Toastmasters who works for the city of Kirkland with the auspicious title of Neighborhood Services Coordinator.
Whoa.
He sets the record for the number of visitors that have been brought through that door for Gone Wild, I believe. And he is an avid kayaker and climber. Recently having climbed Liberty Bell's Becky Road, I believe, with his wife. Christianly speaking to us out of the Speaking to Inform manual, his objectives are to speak about an audience-appropriate topic and to build a supporting case for each major point that he makes using the research that he has gathered. Let's welcome Christian.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, our guests. I really appreciate you being here. The last time I spoke about and the question I was trying to consider was, is speaking with ums more natural? The question I would like to ask today, and maybe answer, is why do we speak with in the first place? Turns out the answer to both of these questions starts in the same place. So I'm going to give you a little preview or a little summary of my last presentation. The last time I spoke, I told you about some researchers who had a hunch that when you speak or while trying to get people on the telephone to participate in a research interview, you're going to have more success. And the thinking was saying or is more natural. Turns out they were right. When you speak about 1 every 500 to 600 words, you get more people who will agree to do your interview. Michael Erard, the author of and a linguist, a guy with a master's degree in linguistics and a PhD in English, held up the study and said, see, ums are very important, don't get rid of them. But that made me think, is he really right? Are ums really important in our speech? Do they really make us sound more natural? The first thing I thought was, well, first of all, these people who were speaking, who were trying to get these interviews, were speaking from a script. They were reading. They weren't speaking. They were reading to strangers. And so yes, an might make them sound more natural. But the other thing I told you about was something I noticed in my own family, in my own home, at dinner time. We have this ritual of tell us about the favorite part of your day. And I noticed that through all the family members, all 5 of us, we rarely spoke with or ah during this ritual. And in even less formal conversation, we spoke rarely with or ah. And I noticed that in other informal conversations with friends, they spoke rarely with and ah. But you insert them in a more formal, more pressurized, more judgmental environment, such as a meeting, and the usage escalates. This was especially true of one of my coworkers in the city manager's office meeting. I will call her Speaks with an She starred in an 80s show about crime-busting vigilantes. She would have been on the team. She spoke with 76 ums in her 5-minute speech, in her 5-minute report to the group. And then 2 weeks later, delivering basically the same report to the same group, spoke with 61 ums. Now this morning, just before I came here, I wanted to see how many ums she'd speak with if it was an informal environment. So I very awkwardly walked over to her desk and extremely awkwardly eavesdropped on a conversation she was having between a coworker. And I counted 6 ums. 6 ums from Speaks with an And then I tried to engage even more awkwardly in a conversation with her directly. And behind my back, I was counting the ums. And I only counted 1. From 76 and 61 to 7. Something tells me the environment has something to do with our usage of ums. Now, there's a lot of research about ums. In fact, it goes back 50 years. We know, for example, that when you're talking on the telephone, you're much more likely to use than when you're talking face-to-face. You're much more likely to use an before a noun. For example, I'm much more likely to say, he went to Skycomish High School than he went to Skycomish High School. We know that men, older people, younger people, and people who come from other countries are more likely to use than, let's say, women. The first researcher of is pictured on the paper that's in front of you. His name is George Wilde. The first thing he wanted to know was, could he detect the anxiety level of his psychiatric patients in their language? And while most of his researchers had discarded them, in fact scrubbed them out of transcripts, George Wilde latched onto them and studied them. He didn't find what he was looking for. What he found was that he, his researchers, his research assistants, the professional staff, the people who should have impeccable speech, spoke with just as much as the psychiatric patients. The second thing he found was that people tend to fall into two different groups. One, people who restart their sentences, and two, people who speak with and And he hypothesized that the people who restarted their sentences were bold, they aimed first, shot second, they were confident, and the people who spoke with were more tentative, they were cautious, they were planners. What he discovered when he compared usage and linguistics of the transcripts of all these psychiatric patients was that the ummers were more attentive. They did come from homes with strict fathers and strict families, people who told them, you got to do this correctly, if you don't, you're in trouble. But he was wrong about the sentence changers. They too were shy public speakers, and they worried about saying something too bluntly. None of this, though, answers the question, why do we say And why do we seem to say more when we're speaking in front of people in a pressurized situation than when we're speaking informally? Or why do we say more on the telephone than when I'm speaking face-to-face with somebody? Well, there is one piece of research that does seem to answer this question, and the finding is this: feedback. We say when we're really looking for feedback. When I'm standing up here, and there's a group of people all around me, and they're sitting like this, or like this, or like this, their eyes are glazing over, I'm not getting any feedback. And so I say to say, hey, are you still with me? Are you still listening to me? Am I saying anything that matters to you? But when I'm speaking face-to-face with somebody, they're saying, In fact, the conversation on which I eavesdropped, I heard a lot of oh yeah, I got you. A lot of feedback, and very few ahs. So what's the trick? I don't know. I'm just here to inform.